Title: What Really Happens Inside Leavenworth, Food, Fear, and the Daily Fight to Survive. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. Entering a place no human is ready for. Before we begin, if you want more real prison stories, more true investigations, and more documentaries that reveal the truth most people never see, hit that subscribe button. Because today you and I are stepping inside Leavenworth, and nothing inside these walls is easy on the mind, the body, or the soul. Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary is one of the oldest and most feared federal prisons in the United States. Built in the early 1900s, its walls were never designed for comfort. They were designed for containment, control, and punishment. And from the moment a person arrives at Leavenworth, whether inmate or officer, they immediately understand one thing: this place changes people. For many inmates, the danger begins before they even reach the cell blocks. The intake process at Leavenworth is known for its cold efficiency. Former inmates describe the atmosphere as dehumanizing, freezing, and emotionally crushing. New arrivals stand in long lines under harsh fluorescent lights, hearing the metal doors slam behind them like the world closing shut forever. It doesn't matter if you're tough. It doesn't matter if you've survived rough neighborhoods. It doesn't matter if you've been locked up before. Leavenworth has a way of stripping away whatever confidence you came in with. One former inmate described the moment he entered as the exact second he understood how fragile a human being can feel. "Your heartbeat changes," he said. "It's like your body knows something your mind doesn't want to accept." And the truth is simple. Leavenworth is dangerous, even before the first night. The cell blocks are loud, but the danger often hides in silence. Officers walk with caution not because of what they see, but because of what they don't see. The atmosphere is unpredictable. Tension moves like electricity through the halls. Every sound echoes. Every shout carries. Every argument can spread like wildfire. Leavenworth wasn't built for modern rehabilitation. It was built for endurance, and for decades, it forced men to adapt or break. But if you really want to understand the brutality of living here, you have to look at something many documentaries ignore: the food. Former inmates say one of the hardest parts of life inside Leavenworth is the daily battle with what's on their tray. Meals are often bland, underseasoned, and poorly portioned. There are documented accounts of food arriving undercooked or left cold for too long. Some inmates describe being served the same thing so many times that their stomachs stopped reacting normally. One former prisoner recalled being handed a tray of gray meat. Another talked about vegetables that tasted like they'd been boiled until they forgot who they were. Food becomes a survival tool. Not nourishment, not comfort, just fuel to keep the body functioning in an unforgiving environment. And sometimes food becomes a form of pressure. Meals are rushed. Lines are long. Noise is overwhelming. Arguments start quickly. Fights can break out over something as small as a seat or a missing utensil. If you're not paying attention, a simple lunchroom moment can turn into a dangerous situation. That is why Leavenworth officers describe the dining hall as one of the most stressful places in the entire prison. But food is only one part of the daily struggle. The treatment, especially in the prison's earlier decades, has been documented as harsh, unforgiving, and often lacking the basic human dignity most people take for granted. Historically, inmates complained of overcrowded cells, limited access to proper medical care, extreme heat in summer, and freezing cold in winter. Reports going back decades talk about men losing sleep because of constant noise, fear, and anxiety. Some say the mental pressure of simply existing inside Leavenworth was sometimes worse than any disciplinary measure. For officers, the job is no easier. Many have described a constant fear of being outnumbered, understaffed, or caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The structure of the building, with long echoing hallways and blind corners, creates conditions where danger can appear instantly. And all of this creates one undeniable truth: Leavenworth is not just a prison. It's a psychological battlefield. Every day is a fight. Not always against others, but against the environment itself. The noise, the food, the treatment, the fear, the unpredictability, the pressure. All of it pushes the human mind to limits it was never built to handle. And for thousands of men across decades, this was their daily reality, a reality many never fully recovered from. In the next chapter, we dive deeper into the daily routines, the power structure, and the emotional cost of surviving Leavenworth's most feared units, where officers tread carefully, and inmates learn that survival requires instincts sharper than steel. Food, fear, and the unwritten rules of survival that shows you what it takes to survive every day afterward. Because once the intake doors slam shut and the first night passes, the true battle begins. A battle against the system, the food, the pressure, and the unwritten rules that every inmate must learn fast if they want to avoid becoming a target. Leavenworth has always had a reputation, not just for being one of America's oldest federal prisons, but for the psychological weight it puts on every human being inside. Former inmates and officers alike describe it as a place where you're constantly watching, listening, calculating. A place where something as simple as walking to the wrong table or saying the wrong word can shift the balance of an entire day. One former inmate put it bluntly: "In Leavenworth, you don't survive with strength, you survive with awareness." And nowhere is that awareness more important than in the daily routines that seem harmless on the outside but are pressure-filled on the inside. The food situation, a daily battle no one escapes. When people imagine prison, they think of cold meals and metal trays, but the truth inside Leavenworth is far worse. Former inmates say that food isn't just a meal here. It's a negotiation, a currency, a danger, and a disappointment all at once. Multiple accounts from across decades describe undercooked meats, overcooked or mushy vegetables, spoiled milk during certain eras, minimal portions that never truly satisfy, food arriving cold before it even reaches the tables. Many inmates said the meals often felt like an afterthought, something put together just to meet requirements, not to care for the people eating it. One former prisoner said he lost nearly 30 pounds in his first months because he simply couldn't force himself to eat certain meals. Another said he grew used to eating fast and hoping for the best. And the dining hall, one of the loudest and most unpredictable spaces, added a new layer of anxiety. Officers described it as the place where emotions ran the highest. Too many bodies packed into one room. Too little space. Too much tension. Arguments often started for reasons that made no sense outside the prison world. A seat. A stare. A line too long. A tray bumped by accident. In Leavenworth, food wasn't just survival. It was stress. Fear becomes routine, and that's the scary part. Most prisons in America have danger. But Leavenworth is known for something different: the normalization of that danger. Officers say that after a few years, fear becomes part of the schedule. Something you manage, like checking in or walking to count. Inmates say the same thing. Fear doesn't disappear. You just learn how to carry it. One former officer recalled that he always paused before turning certain corners because of the building's layout. The design, built over a century ago, creates blind spots that modern prisons wouldn't allow. Narrow hallways. Long shadowed corridors. Stairways that echo but don't reveal what's below. Sometimes, he said, you hear something before you see it, and by the time you see it, it might already be too late. For inmates, the fear was different. It was layered. Fear of other inmates. Fear of officers. Fear of the environment itself. Every sound mattered. Every silence mattered more. Even the weather affected the tension. Hot summers made tempers short, while cold winters made the concrete feel painfully unforgiving. The unwritten rules. The real system running Leavenworth. But above all, survival in Leavenworth depended on learning the unwritten rules. The ones no officer tells you, the ones no handbook explains. Former inmates across decades have described rules like: don't sit at a table unless you know who controls it. Never touch another man's food. Mind your business, even if you hear shouting. Respect personal space even when there isn't any. Never appear too weak or too aggressive. Always be aware of who is behind you. Breaking one of these rules didn't always lead to physical consequences, but it could mark you instantly as someone who didn't understand the environment, and that alone made you vulnerable. One inmate said, "You learn faster than you ever wanted to. Because mistakes inside Leavenworth don't come cheap." The emotional toll, the part no one talks about. News headlines talk about violence, escapes, gangs. But former inmates say the deeper suffering at Leavenworth came from loneliness, uncertainty, constant noise, lack of privacy, poor mental health support, fear of losing your identity. Men describe days blending together, routines becoming mechanical, hope becoming something you only feel during visits. And even those don't last long. Officers, too, reported burnout, stress-related health problems, and emotional exhaustion from constant hyper-awareness. One former officer said, "This place doesn't just confine inmates, it drains everyone who works here too." The daily fight to survive. By the time someone has spent a year in Leavenworth, they are no longer the person who walked through the intake doors. The routines become muscle memory. The anxiety becomes part of breathing. The noise becomes part of thinking. Life inside isn't just punishment. It's endurance. It's survival. It's a daily fight to stay mentally stable in a place where everything around you is designed to break you down. The blocks that broke men and the truth behind Leavenworth's brutal legacy. By the time you reach Leavenworth's most feared units, you already understand that this place is more than punishment. It is a system designed to test the limits of the human mind. But inside certain cell blocks, the pressure becomes something else entirely. Former inmates and officers describe these wings as the breaking point, places where noise, isolation, fear, and history collide so intensely that even the strongest personalities begin to crack. Leavenworth's older cell blocks, especially during the mid-1900s, were notorious for conditions that pushed inmates toward emotional exhaustion. Narrow cells barely large enough for a bed, concrete floors colder than ice in winter, and iron bars that rattled every time a man shifted his weight. Those blocks weren't just built to house inmates, they were built to contain energy, frustration, anger, and despair. Former inmates say the noise was the first thing that slowly broke you down. The constant clanging, shouting, footsteps, and metal-on-metal sounds became part of your heartbeat. At first, you try to ignore it. Then you try to accept it. Eventually, you realize you can't escape it. Not inside your cell, not in the yard, not during count, not even in your sleep. One inmate described the experience this way. The noise becomes your new silence. The old segregation units, the prison's most restrictive areas, were even worse. Reports from previous decades reveal extreme isolation, 24-hour confinement in some eras, minimal sunlight, emotional withdrawal, lack of effective mental health support, punitive conditions that felt endless. Human beings are simply not built to endure long periods of sensory deprivation or emotional isolation. And many men housed in those blocks felt themselves fading, their identity shrinking with each passing day. Former officers who worked these units described the atmosphere as heavy and disturbingly quiet. Not quiet in a peaceful way, quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. One officer said, "When you walk past the segregation cells, you feel like time slows down. You feel the weight of everything that's happened here, and everything that could happen." Historical events that shaped Leavenworth's brutal reputation. Leavenworth's reputation wasn't built overnight. It was shaped by years of overcrowding, unrest, and moments that left deep scars on the institution. While we won't describe anything graphic, it's important to understand the general patterns documented in official reports. Periods of severe inmate tension across decades. Major disturbances triggered by overcrowding and poor conditions. Harsh disciplinary methods used in early 20th century. Repeated federal investigations into treatment and conditions. Mental health crises that were often ignored or mismanaged in older eras. These events didn't just affect inmates, they affected officers too. Many correctional staff members left the job early because of the emotional toll, the stress, and the constant anxiety of working in an environment where the rules were always shifting. When officers talk about Leavenworth, they don't describe it as a building. They describe it as a force, something that changes the mood of everyone inside. One former officer said, "In Leavenworth, the job isn't dangerous once in a while. It's dangerous every single day. The emotional collapse, the part that never makes headlines. There's a hidden cost to living inside Leavenworth that most documentaries ignore, the psychological decline." Former inmates talk about losing the sense of time, developing anxiety and hyperalertness, difficulty sleeping because of the noise or fear, feeling disconnected from reality, becoming emotionally numb, having breakdowns during long periods of tension. One man said the hardest part wasn't the fights, the rules, or the food. It was the silence that followed them. The silence after lights out. The silence in segregation. The silence of missing home. The silence of knowing you may never be the same again. Officers reported similar emotional exhaustion. Working inside Leavenworth meant carrying stress home every day, constantly replaying things that happened inside the walls, and always wondering if tomorrow would be worse. The legacy of a prison that tested human limits. Leavenworth is still a functioning federal penitentiary today, though conditions have changed significantly from the harsh decades of the past. But its reputation wasn't built on rumor or fiction. It was built on decades worth of real human suffering, real tension, real psychological battles, and real stories from people who lived through it. For inmates, the struggle was constant. Food that barely nourished. Rules that demanded total awareness. Conditions that pushed the mind to breaking point. For officers, the danger was relentless. Shifts filled with fear, unpredictability, and mental strain. Leavenworth's legacy is not about violence. It's about the invisible wounds left behind. The cracked identities. The emotional fatigue. The memories that men carried for the rest of their lives. This is what really happens inside Leavenworth. The food, the fear, the daily fight to survive. And for thousands of men over more than a century, that fight was a battle they never forgot.